In her book, The Last Straw, Rita Mae Brown asks us to pin down our class position by thinking of class not so much in terms of material wealth or placement, but of behavior. She points out that all of us have behavioral patterns that are determined by class, which sometimes go unrecognized. She says, and I quote, "Class is much more than Marx's definition of relationship to the means of production. Class involves your behavior, your basic assumptions about life, how you are taught to behave, what you expect from yourself and from others, your concept of a future, how you understand problems and solve them, how you think, feel, act. It is these behavioral patterns," she says, "which must be recognized, understood, and changed."
In the resources given with this section, there's a quiz that you can take that allows you to identify your class privileges, or the lack of them, in sometimes surprising ways. Sometimes our basic assumptions about life, as Brown calls them, are so deeply embedded in our experience that we hardly acknowledge them at all. These assumptions often include our experiences as they are filtered through issues of race, class, gender, sexual orientation, or even our legal status within the country we are situated in. While race is sometimes more overtly evident, class often gets forgotten or erased from our consciousness, because in general, we see it mostly as a manifestation of money or financial status. In this segment, we are going to focus on some of the ways in which gender intersects with class in more and also less obvious ways. As a representative example of how this works, let's look at one of the most ubiquitous modes of pressure in any society, the pressure to look good. You may think that this is self-evident. What is there to question in the desire to be beautiful, to look your best, to be attractive, and so on? Quite a lot, actually. And first, we will consider the image of the thin, fair woman that dominates so much of Western culture as the type of beauty that all women should aspire to, and what it has to do with class.
Before the Industrial Revolution in America and Europe, being fair-skinned was a sign of wealth and privilege because it meant that you did not have to work with your hands outdoors. You were rich enough to spend your time indoors, to have the right kind of headgear, hats, parasols that would shield you from the sun. In many cases, in some cultures, this is still true, and fair skin is still a prized quality, representing, among other things, wealth. Of course, this is a complex phenomenon deserving of its own discussion, which we can do later. Tanned white women were therefore women of the working class. However, as you might have noticed, there is a great deal of pressure now for white Western women to be tanned. Why this sudden change in notions of beauty, you might wonder? Remember that the Industrial Revolution brought men and women in from the fields, into factories and workshops. Here, they were completely deprived of the sun, since the buildings were often windowless, not very well ventilated, and everyone who worked in them became pale and sickly looking. Meanwhile, the affluent middle class could now afford to go to a sunny city or country for the winter, where they acquired tans. For men as well as for women, being tanned now became a sign of affluence and wealth. So much so that today, people who can't afford holidays on foreign locations or beaches now go to tanning salons in order to get their tans. Ironically, women of some cultures drive the sales of fairness creams in order to be lighter skinned, which goes a long way to show that beauty ideals connected to skin color are forever changing and socially constructed. Interestingly, what connects women of all cultures everywhere is that when it comes to beauty ideals, women are never perceived to be beautiful just as they are.
Similarly, being large, overweight, even fat at different points in time and in different cultures used to be a sign of wealth because it indicated that you had a good amount of food to eat and did not have to do physical work. Surprisingly, this was true of both men and women. Consider, for example, this 17th century painting of the Three Graces by Peter Paul Rubens. Back then, being thin indicated poverty and a lack of food. However, from the late 19th century through the 20th century till today, being fit is the privilege of the wealthy, people with enough money to eat healthy food and have access to gyms and other modes of exercise. For men now, the muscled body of the field hand or factory worker is now achieved at the gym and therefore privileged as desirable or beautiful. Ironically, in some countries, the unhealthy food available to poorer people is now responsible for making obesity a problem of people without money to afford better food. In our reading list for this segment, you'll find other examples of the intersection of gender and class and what it says about our sense of privilege.